Hello and welcome to Waracle Talks. Today we're speaking to Shaun Marrinan, who is a client principal here at Waracle. We'll be speaking about his experience in the commercial function and demand and sales roles. We'll be speaking about his experience in the energy sector and the future of the energy grid in Western countries. We'll be talking about innovative digital products and their potential for changing consumer behavior and how they might influence people going forward. And similarly, we'll be talking about the next generation of digital transformation and how it might impact the energy and utility sector. It's going to be a great conversation. So a little season of Waracle Talks that we've been putting together were originally supposed to have one of our esteemed colleagues who unfortunately is unwell. And today I welcome Shaun from our commercial and demand function to have a little conversation with us about digital product development in 2025, a little bit about what he's excited about in terms of innovative solutions in the space, and to speak about a blog that he kindly wrote for the marketing team as an article for LinkedIn. Shaun,
Hello.
thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks for that. I'm excited.
This is a strange format to welcome one of your colleagues into, where all of a sudden you've got lots of lights pointing at your face and a microphone a stone's throw from your mouth. So tell us a bit about your background, both within the business and within the kind of broader consultancy space, and a little bit about what gets you excited for digital product development in 2025.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Blair. So, Shaun Marrinan, been client partner at Waracle for about the last 5 years. Prior to Waracle is about just a bit less than 15 years working in financial services. So my experience spanned from working in international retail banking, which was credit cards, loans, insurance, money transfers. I did that for quite a long time at Tesco Bank, about 8 years. After that, it was about, I want to say 2017, that was the peak era for FinTech and cryptocurrency and all these interesting things that were happening in the world. So I took a move to London to get a little bit closer to that sector, where I joined one of the rapidly scaling international payment startups that was based in London, followed by a bit of time with the UK's leading cash deposit platform, which I had a great experience. And then I took the move to Waracle and came back home to Scotland. So since I've been at Waracle, I get to work with some of our most strategic clients across energy, life sciences and financial services. So yeah, it's been a great experience. The other part of your question was what gets me out of bed in the morning. But what I love to do at Waracle and what we do at Waracle in terms of building digital products, the most exciting part for me is working with these really impactful, ambitious clients. But it's the impact that digital and software can have for these clients and their customers and their customer base. So that's the most exciting thing for me, is every day the projects that we work on, the initiatives that we work on, building digital products creates tremendous value and helps literally millions of people in the UK and beyond. I think we've got some stats around tens of millions of people use the services that we've built. So that's really exciting, it's really rewarding, and that's what I enjoy the most at Waracle.
Incredible. In terms of your experience in financial services and the fintech space and in the businesses that you mentioned down in London, were you working closely with the digital product teams in terms of building out that customer experience, or were you slightly removed from the sort of digital front door, so to speak?
Good question. My career and my experience, I've always been focused on and working close to clients, be it mainly enterprise and also financial services clients for a long time. So for me, whilst digital and technology has always been core to every business that I've worked at, and probably I can't imagine any business that doesn't have digital software or technology at the core of how it works in this day and age. I would struggle to name one. But the most important thing for me is working really closely with these businesses, understanding the problems or the opportunities that they have, coming up with a hypothesis or a perspective about how we solve these challenges. And the challenges or opportunities are always in service for their customers ultimately. But where digital comes in, it's the transition from the why are we wanting to solve this problem or opportunity to how do we implement it? What do we do specifically to implement it? So yes, I worked really closely with technology teams, product teams, but I've always seen myself as a bit of a conduit between both the client and the customers and the problems and opportunities, and then the technology and the product teams, acting as a bit of a bridge, sort of translating the mission that the client has and the objective into a technical reality. And as I said, I don't think you can ever be far away from technology when you're working in banks, fintech, energy, life sciences, and all these other types of firms.
Oh, amazing. You mentioned that you've been in a range of roles, sort of spanning the world of sort of commercial, sales, potentially even little bits of marketing alongside sort of client and accounts. I know from speaking to you and from being your colleague that you've recently completed a technical degree. I suppose the question would be, what led you to focus on doing that, and why a technical degree when you'd come from a very sort of business and growth specific background?
Yeah, good question. I've always been curious in my career. Like, I've always had a sort of exploratory mindset, and that's led me. It took quite a few years initially in my career to find what I really wanted to do. So if I think back to early stages in my career, I actually was in technical roles. I pivoted a little bit into core finance roles, but when I finally got into a role that was much closer to managing relationships with clients, managing P&Ls, commercials, contracts, but most importantly, being with clients and on site and working directly with customers even, that's where I got the most value from my career. And it's at that point I decided to specialise much more. So rather than being very general in what I was trying to achieve, I got really into the specialism of and the craft of commercial and relationship management. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, ultimately solving problems and making the most opportunities for businesses to help their customers. So I've been doing that type of role for quite a long time, and I've worked with loads of tier one and other types of businesses to help them achieve it. But one thing I noticed, and one thing that I believe, is that I think the leaders of the future will be technical in some sense. I think you don't have to be hands-on in the tools necessarily, but I think you should be able to bridge the gap between customers, problems, opportunities, and technical solution and implementation.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's software and digital products that allow businesses to scale and have a great deal of impact. So I noticed in myself that whilst I was really enjoying and having the opportunity to work a lot with clients and so on, what I was missing was, for me personally in my skill set or in the toolbox, was a greater understanding of the technical implementation and the technical how and what of bringing these to life. So I decided to undertake a part-time master's degree at Queen's University Belfast. We've got a great reputation for the computer science labs, also for their spin-outs and startups. So it's a really great place to study and study part-time over 3 years. Waracle enabled me to do that as well, which was great. And over the course of those 3 years, I studied computer science, software development, got really deep into AI and machine learning, all of which is tremendously valuable for my role. And what that allowed me to do is really, I try to bridge the conversation between the commercial and the problem solving and the hypothesis that the business is making into the technical reality. And whilst I'm not necessarily implementing any of the technical solutions that people are working on, I'm that bridge. I try and be the conduit between both. And it's been fab. And I would say that not all learning has to come from university or formal education. For me, that's how I like to learn. But actually working at Waracle, I've had exposure to some disciplines that I've not worked with closely before and really understood the power of them.
Yeah.
So as an example, working really closely with the design team over the last 5 years gave me a brilliant understanding of what that function does. So it's really about truly understanding what type of problem are we trying to solve. And that's really the great strength of design. And I've witnessed a number of examples working with designers and technologists where they've taken a client hypothesis around a problem or opportunity, and through doing great research, following great design practices, it actually turned out that we're maybe solving the wrong problem initially, and we've refined the problem. So all of what I'm saying is to come back to the point that I think to be a really strong commercial and relationship leader, I think it's really useful if you have a good understanding of not just the design and the technology that you're trying to implement, but also what the client does as well. Education helped me do that, and yeah, it's been great. It's paid off in dividends in my experience.
It's fascinating, and I do think it's a really good point that you make about T-shaped people in the modern kind of employment era. I mean, I started out, my first job in digital was in data teams, and then I kind of like realized the sort of boundary conditions of my technical capability, and sort of moved into strategy teams. From there, moved into more marketing specific roles, then moved into more commercial roles. And sometimes it makes you feel a little bit like I'm a sort of a generalist max. I'm a master of nothing. I'm not like a deep discipline expert. But what I think that does give you is a much better understanding of the meta context for which businesses are trying to apply digital data and technology, because you understand a lot more about how the big thing functions. When you've been working in organizations, is that something that you're interested in, is sort of zooming out and understanding how the big thing operates more so than just understanding a slice of the organization?
100%. I think it's critical that you understand the wider market context, the wider business context, and it comes up all the time in our roles. It's really easy to get in the detail, let's say, of like a technical issue or an implementation issue or a project issue or something along those lines, and that is really important. Like, the execution is very important, but without stepping back and asking why and figuring out how the work we do connects to the bigger picture for that industry or that corporation, or actually those consumers, the changing needs and demands of consumers that the business is serving. Without that, you don't really have your North Star, and that really helps, I think, guide all of the work that we do here at Waracle and with our clients and our partners that we work with as well. So it's fundamental, really important, none more so than in the energy sector, where we've been doing a lot of work over the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Speaking specifically about the energy sector, you recently took on the opportunity to write an article for us for the website. You focus specifically on the potential impact of the sort of twin sort of axis of artificial intelligence and decarbonisation, and its impact that it's likely to have over the next decade on electricity demands. I suppose that's the meta context for what is, I suppose, the background for your day-to-day interactions with energy clients. What is it about that topic and about that sort of meta challenge that excites you and, I suppose, potentially, puts the fear of God in you?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I probably could say quite a lot on it and maybe in a disorganized approach, but there was something that I found right at the heart of this. So maybe if I just recap a little bit, if
For
someone's not read the article, what I was trying to do was give a slightly new perspective on what's going on in both the energy market and with the boom of artificial intelligence. So the energy market, many people may or may not know exactly how it's structured, but the way I like to think about it is you've got energy generation. So that could be wind farms, solar panels, other traditional means of creating energy. You have the transmission that takes energy from where it's generated, and the distribution that gets it close to people's homes and businesses and that type of thing. And then you have the retail side of it, and the retail side is about getting people through digital means connected into their energy supplier. So we've got this amazing infrastructure that kind of behind the scenes powers our daily lives. So if you want to heat your home, if you want to feed your family, it's all the power that's being generated by these energy companies who are making us be able to do that, travel, do all the things that we do and take for granted every single day. What's really interesting about energy is for quite a long time, we've known about net zero, the ambitions to decarbonise and get to net zero, electrify the grid. And that's quite a tall order. So that's a societal change that energy companies are making, and we as a society are making. And that's things like thinking about many people switching to electric cars. There's some data that we have that shows predictions that there'll be 10 million electric cars in the UK in the coming future. So that's a massive change. That means we need a whole new electrical infrastructure, EV chargers, which many people will see in their own homes and nearby their homes. Things like heat pumps at people's houses to change the way that we generate heat and energy. Solar panels are becoming more and more common, as you see in lots of new builds. So the industry and actually the country and internationally, there's a move to net zero and decarbonise, and all these new things are changing. The background to that, when I described the energy generation, the transportation of energy and the connection of it, that's built on a grid which was built, roughly in our grandparents' era. So this wasn't necessarily considered. So there's a really interesting challenge to make sure the grid can support all of this electrification and the new needs and demands of consumers. So that's one aspect. That's the aspect that we all knew about.
Yeah.
The second aspect that came by surprise was artificial intelligence. And I had a really interesting quote on a podcast recently when I think it was Sam Altman was talking about, do you remember the Turing test? That seemed to be such a big thing that one day an AI may pass the Turing test, but the phrase he used, we've blown past that. And it's almost like taken for granted how rapid this technology has moved. The interesting part about artificial intelligence is it has a great demand on the electrical infrastructure. And you see countries and businesses now building data centers wherever they can. There's a huge movement to capture all of this energy and demand. So if we go back to think about the grid that we've got just now that's trying to adapt and is adapting for net zero and decarbonisation, now has to also adapt for the demands of artificial intelligence. And those demands aren't going away. It will become greater and greater. So there's a supply and demand issue here. Demand is increasing. Supply is a bit of a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And what I find so interesting about that is, sure, we can build new infrastructure. That might take some time. But through software and working smarter, can we do smarter things with the existing infrastructure that we've got? And that becomes this really fascinating story about energy, which is the fundamental operating system for our society, and how we can keep it relevant and stable in the age of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's a few things that I was thinking about as you were talking there. I remember speaking to an ex-colleague of mine who worked in this space, and he said that one of the biggest problems that we had with sort of clean power, green power, was that you're not guaranteed that it's going to be windy or you're going to be generating lots of power from wave at the point people need it.
Yeah.
And so what you need to work out is that relationship between demand and how generation takes place, and what happens in between that is storage. And, you understand the massive leaps forward that we've taken in terms of batteries over the last 10 or 15 years. We're still not at the point where we can store, large amounts of electricity to wait for the demand to come online. And there was an interesting perspective that I heard a couple of years back about the idea of being your own personal grid. The idea that, if you were boiling your kettle, you could pull from the battery in your Tesla. Yeah. Instead of going out to actual supply. And I suppose that the changing demands of that are creating education in the space. Certainly it was for me, in that understanding a system that was developed and an infrastructure that was developed for maybe 2 decades ago's energy consumption is now having a whole range of new sort of J-curve trends placed upon it in the early 2020s. It's interesting because I think that it drives a lot of the decisions that energy companies will be making over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years in terms of investment. You've been working with energy companies for pretty much the whole time you've been at Waracle. And Waracle as a business have been working with them for over a decade. What excites you in terms of what's being built in that sector, and where do you see the innovative solutions appearing to sort of answer some of the sort of meta concerns that you outlined in your article?
Yes, so I think about it in a couple of different ways. So I think there's macro changes that get made, which are really useful to know. I think there's also some detailed micro changes that have been made in projects and businesses and initiatives. So just to talk about the macro changes for a second, it relates exactly to what you were mentioned earlier. I had a really interesting term. It was from Stanford University, but I don't know who coined it. It was the first place that I saw it. So if you think of energy consumers, typically we're maybe not that, or traditionally we're maybe not that concerned about our energy. And what I mean by that is we're not managing it on a day-to-day basis. Maybe your thermostat goes on, you want to make sure your lights go on, but it's in the background. And the term that I heard from Stanford was going from consumer to prosumer. Okay. So the idea of the prosumer is actively managing their energy supply. So a couple of the examples you gave were they maybe have an electric vehicle. So what I'm seeing energy companies doing and have been doing in recent years are they may encourage through digital means, so it'll be through an app or using your laptop or your iPad. They may encourage you to charge your car at a different time when there's less demand on the grid. Therefore, it's cheaper for you to charge your car outside of peak hours. So there's a much changed relationship between many people and their energy. They want to have a more thorough understanding of the energy that they use, the price that they pay, and then they've got these different levers that they can pull now through digital means to change when they charge things. And all of that's built on software, all of that's built on data, and it's really fascinating. So that's kind of the big picture for me. A few examples that I've seen that have been really interesting and worked really well, and maybe in adjacent spaces. There was a project that we worked on at Waracle where we used machine learning and AI to capture meter readings for consumers or prosumers. So they would take their phone, simply send in a picture of the meter reading, and using the system that we built, we would automatically capture the meter readings, and it would go through an automated process. What that facilitated was real ease for the person that used their phone and real optimization for the client that built this system. And it meant that people they had previously who were manually looking at these pictures and entering the data in manually can move to much more higher value tasks in that space. So I found that really novel application of AI and machine learning. But we've done loads of great projects around mobile apps, websites, cloud migrations. One that I've liked, we've done a couple of times is secure data. So how do we take data that's very confidential, but federate that data across approved people within a business, make sure it's secure, complies to all relevant regulation. And those projects are also really fascinating. So they're not always the headline grabbing projects, but they really solve a real problem for the businesses who are managing confidential data that must be accurate. And those are also really enjoyable behind the scenes, making sure things are working.
Yeah. It's a fascinating point that you make, and I think it's one that probably resonates with most people, is that not many of us think about when we do certain things in our day-to-day lives and the potential impact that behavior has on the sort of network of systems that we interact with. And I suppose that the one that always gets played back is that, the TV ad break in Coronation Street. Everyone goes and puts the kettle on. There's a big spike in demand. But I suppose that equally the point that you're making is that digital has a role to play, and data and technology have a role to play in driving positive behavioral change, because it informs people in a way that they previously wouldn't have been informed, to be able to make more prescient sort of decisions on when they consume with more knowledge available to them. Do you think that kind of sort of push or sort of drive for behavioral change, is that something that needs to happen more so in the commercial space as much as in the sort of individual consumer space in the energy market?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I think if you go back to the why, let's say for the consumer, maybe I'll speak for myself. The things that I want from my energy provider are, I want the price to be reasonable for what I use. I want to be able to easily communicate with my chosen energy provider. And if there's ever an issue, I want it resolved quickly. And I think that's broadly true for lots of people. The way that I think we can achieve that often is through digital means. So by using apps, chatbots, great websites, well-designed user experiences, processes, it means that energy firms can optimize the communication that they have with clients. But it's important to remember there's a mix. Not everybody does want to interface purely by digital means. They still want to contact call centres and speak to people. And that's also a place where we can work to optimize solutions in the background. For me, technology is about removing friction for users and consumers and the people and businesses that work with them. There's another interesting concept I wanted to mention. I think it's related, just tangentially related.
Perfect.
Maybe it will be a future article. I need to talk to you and Emily about that. But there's something I've been keeping my eye on is virtual power plants, VPP. It's relatively new. I mean, there's some companies doing this already, but I think this is going to become even more relevant in the future. So just to give a little bit of an example, or a high level example, as I mentioned before, energy demand is going to increase and increase and increase. And the ways that some of the energy businesses will tackle that is through improving the grid infrastructure, having smarter digital solutions to optimize things. But we've seen with the data that there's going to be in the UK a trebling of the number of air source heat pumps that will be in households, trebling of the number of EV car chargers. And that presents a really interesting opportunity, which some businesses are looking to tackle right now. So if you think you've got these physical devices in people's homes, heat pumps, chargers, solar panels, and bigger energy generating facilities and infrastructure.
Yeah.
With software, if you connect large groups of these together, so if you connect solar panels across a neighbourhood, plus air source heat pumps, plus EV chargers, you can then act in a smart way around demand. So if the grid is at peak demand and costs are at their highest, with customers' permission, with control and following regulation, you can ramp down the usage of these tools, you can ramp up the usage of these tools. So all of a sudden you've got this distributed network, not a single monolithic control panel for energy, but you've got this distributed across the country. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think we're going to see new entrants in the market doing this. I think we're going to see incumbents trying to maximize this opportunity as well. So it's really fascinating, I think, to flip between the needs and demands of the individuals, like I described myself earlier.
Yeah.
I just want reasonably priced energy that I can interact with via my mobile phone. And if I've got a problem, it gets resolved quickly. It's really straightforward demands. And then if you think at the macro level, where we've got this grid that there's so much demand coming through it, we have to think of these novel and innovative ways to control the amount of energy that's coming through the grid at certain times. That's why I think it's a really impactful industry. It's societal based. Every country's facing these challenges at the same time. There's never been a more exciting time to be working in energy, I would say.
And I wonder if, like many industries, it's moving from a sort of one-to-many to one-to-few to a one-to-one sort of personalised type service to a certain extent, in the respect that, you know, if you move to a new area and you're the only house on your street that has an electric vehicle and an air source heat pump, your electricity demands are going to outstretch other people in the area's electricity demands, but their gas will exceed yours because you're maybe not using any at all. And so what you'll end up getting is probably brought into the area onto a new provider with like a blended cost price, which isn't in any way reflective of the actual usage that you have. And so that sort of one-to-few model of pricing will have to shift to a one-to-one personalized model of pricing, right? And as the system gets better at being able to deal with the intricacies of different households and intricacies of different, you know, collections of households in different streets throughout the country, we'll have like a much more performant infrastructure for the future of energy in the UK.
It's a really interesting point. It touches on a few things. So, for example, some energy providers with permission from their customers will ask for real-time updates, I think within minutes of the energy usage. And why that can be really powerful is it can really help understand what is the energy signature of your home specifically. And if companies and our clients can get this data with permission and appropriately, they can start to move to individualized pricing. So that's one element. And I think it also plays into the power of design for applications and for mobile journeys, and really thinking about serving a user and treating that user and that person as an individual who has individual needs.
Yeah.
And that's where great design comes into play. Something quite interesting I was reading about recently was on air source heat pumps. So it was theoretical, but the idea was that an air source heat pump can heat your home. Every home will have its own unique thermal signature. So your house may be different from my house. When the heat pump heats your house up, if it was to be switched off, your house will have a different period than mine from when it cools down. And that's quite interesting when you think about these large connections of air source heat pumps. It means that if you want to reduce demand on the grid, if we switched off our heat pumps at the same time, your house might get cooler than mine. So what you actually need is a tailored system with data, with good technological practices to understand specifically what's the thermal signature of your house in my house, and how can we control that. That for me is at the bleeding edge of what's going on with technology and energy, and quite an exciting area to explore.
That's fascinating. I'll bring it back to marketing, as I have want to do sometimes, in that if you understand the sort of growth and decay of your communications as you go out to market with particular communications, the idea is finding that sort of load balance of communications. And I suppose what you're explaining is exactly the same. Ultimately, rather than having your heating on for 12 hours straight on a particular thermostat level, just consistently keeping it that temperature, it might be more prudent to kind of load balance it over time, knowing that it will never drop below a particular temperature. That's fascinating. If you had to sort of look out into the space and think about proof of concept that you've seen in the energy sector, you mentioned a couple already. Are there any others that like have really lit you up, or any stories that you've heard recently that you feel like it's given you renewed kind of vigor for your work in the energy sector?
Yeah, totally. Some of it is really fundamental stuff. One example, and it's something we've done a lot at Waracle for our clients, is focusing on accessibility.
Yeah.
It's often forgotten. It can often be forgotten, the quality of your digital tools, be it your website, your app. And it's really, really important that these are made accessible for people. Everyone has different needs when they're interacting with devices, and there's certain standards that are not regulated, but they're out there in the world that you can adhere to. So I've always really enjoyed working on projects with our clients when we're focused on accessibility. So making your website, your app easier to read, easier to listen to, even videos to watch, and taking into account the range of different needs that people have. So that's to me should be a fundamental and non-negotiable.
Serving vulnerable people, I suppose, just writ large, because I suppose energy and interaction with energy is a populace-wide endeavour, right?
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're taking into account the needs of every perspective, I suppose.
Absolutely. And if you think about a house that loses its power supply, that could have a young child at home who can't, be in a house with no heating. It could have someone with a ventilator that needs to be plugged in at all times. So it's really crucial to know that, not just even from an interaction layer, so through applications and technology, but literally through the people's needs at home. How do we know? How do we get the data with permission to understand that there's a priority person living in that home that needs reconnected? So it's really fascinating. I think the energy sector go a real long way of making sure that they serve a broad spectrum of society, the whole of society, as indeed energy is for the entirety of society. Some of the other things I saw recently, a company who's working really hard on switching digital demand to the greenest power centres that they can find, which is quite a nice idea. So the idea would be, if you're loading, you're serving content to millions of users, let's say, if the content's being served from a data centre that's got high demand from carbon energy, the tool that's being devised here is, well, let's switch it to the data centre that's running on green energy at that moment in time. So that's quite an interesting way. And coming back to what I talked about earlier, is working smarter. You don't necessarily need new physical infrastructure, but if you have different ways of thinking and different ways of approaching data and software and working a bit smarter, you can change the demand.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, this whole conversation's been absolutely amazing. Just to close out, I'd like to ask you a little question, I suppose, that has a more sort of a people slant and a more sort of future of the workforce slant. If a young person was looking to develop into a position within a technology consultancy and was looking to build out a career in kind of demand, whether that's in sales, whether that's in marketing, whether that's more in client, do you have any advice you would give to that individual looking to sort of step into our industry?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think that if you're in a client-facing role, there's some fundamental things that you should consider. So I think you should be curious. With the curiosity will lead you to question things, to understand needs, challenges, opportunities a lot better. Going back to the why, really understanding the why. So I think curiosity will really help you. I think you have to have really high integrity, and I think you have to have resilience, because things change. Like even the energy market, when something changes politically or internationally, that can have an effect on the industry that was unplanned. So you need to have a lot of resilience, I would say, as well. And one comment, you don't necessarily have to be technical. Often in my career, I've heard people qualify something they're about to say by saying, I'm not technical, but I just want to reassure you that everyone can be technical. Technology is an ocean of information and knowledge. It's for everyone. It's not an exclusive club. So I would recommend that if you are working in technology in a client services or a client-facing role, technology is there to be learned and understood. You don't have to understand all of it, but you need to have enough understanding to be credible. And then, you can bring in the deep SME craft experts that you have as well. So it's a really rewarding career. I think if you're curious, I think if you've got integrity, resilience, you're open to learn about technology. And probably the last thing I'll say, it's really important to know what your business does. That'll make you a really good client person, but it's even better to really understand your client's business and your client's environment and the trends that they're working under. I think that'll take you from good to great.
And I think it's still very much a people-oriented endeavour, so it's still one that benefits from people who are good communicators, who are articulate, and who I suppose ultimately are curious about the reasons why other humans do what they do. So a strong sort of focus on understanding the psychology of other individuals always benefits sales and marketing too, doesn't it?
Totally. I think you have to be a real interest in people, a real authentic interest in people and the challenges they face and the things that they're trying to achieve. I think you're spot on.
It's been an incredible 30 odd minutes, and thanks so much for joining us today, Shaun. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Breaking the seal on the early editions of these Waracle Talks. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks very much.